Hey there, I am back again. This is a response video, or a video rather, in response to Nigel's video in regards to the genetic memory. Um, I guess the best way to start this, or I'll preface this by saying, Nigel, that was a great video. As Grim mentioned, very thought provoking. Definitely touched on some points that hit home with me personally, and definitely some other tidbits or topics that you mentioned that I am also in agreement with. So yeah, let's go for it. So just kind of in summary, travel back 45 years ago to October of 1980. I was just freshly hatched, and I was given up for adoption, according to my birth mother, who I met literally just a couple years ago. Her and her friend and her parents had it all planned out. Uh, she was living at the time in the city where uh, I was born. She was living with her parents, and in order to continue residency with her parents, she basically had to give me up for adoption. So she made that decision to give me up. There's a little bit more to that I found out since meeting my birth mother and birth father. I'm not quite sure. I guess it's kind of weird to me. It's kind of foreign to me. I don't know if I can necessarily call them mother and father. I know some people say, well, she gave birth to you, so that's your mother. But I don't quite agree with that. Um, I don't believe. Oh, sorry. I don't believe that blood makes you family. I don't. And that could be a whole nother topic on its own. But I don't believe that just blood or blood alone makes you family. I don't believe that especially in this case, just because she gave birth to me, I don't think that qualifies her. In my opinion, I don't think that qualifies her as my mom or my mother. And even after meeting her, it's almost, I guess, the if I had to pick a word or a term, it would be maybe acquaintance, or maybe friend. Although I might kind of use that term a little loosely. I'm not sure. I haven't quite, I guess, figured that out yet. But I think I'll stick with acquaintance for now. But my birth father, he played in several bands, did a lot of traveling. I guess I know that's where I get my um, music talent from, because I do play electric guitar. I don't consider myself to be that great. It's a kind of a work in progress, but it is definitely an interest it's a lifelong interest. But I'll get to more on that. But he played in several bands, hit up several bars which is where he met her. Um, According to him, she and her friend approached him. According to her, he approached her. So it's really anybody's guess at this point how the whole interaction, took place or went down. And it doesn't really matter at this point. Although I do find it interesting to hear two different versions of the story, but I guess I can't say I'm surprised. But they it was kind of a one-time thing with them. Then he left, went and did his thing. He didn't even realize that she was pregnant. Uh, he tried to write her letters, and she never responded. Um, she did tell me that she was going to have an abortion before she decided to give me up for adoption. But the reason why she didn't go through with the abortion is because she thought it would be too painful, not mentally, physically. So that's interesting. But I it doesn't honestly really bother me that much. I mean, I appreciate the transparency and the honesty. I'm a sucker for give it to me gun barrel straight. The brutal truth. I don't like sugarcoating things. I like brutal honesty. That's just, I mean, that's how I am, and I appreciate it when others reciprocate in that same manner. But I was at the children's home where I was given up for adoption, or where I was taken. I was there for probably about 3 4 months. Um, she and her friend were on their way to come see me, literally hours after my adoptive parents came to pick me up. But there was a snowstorm apparently, and her friend got lost. My birth uh, biological mother, she doesn't drive. I'm still not quite sure what the deal is there, but she's got some mental issues. She's got some different things going on. Not exactly sure what exactly, but there's definitely something there. Um, and kind of the same with my birth father as well. But once they finally did get there, I had already been picked up. So her words, she wanted to come hold me one more time, and she had a toy that she wanted to drop off for me. But when I was already picked up, I was already gone at that point. So um, I was heading home with my new adoptive family. Um, growing up, I was told. I think I was first told. I want to say around 11, 12 ish, that I am adopted. Um, and the interesting thing there is, I guess maybe I was just too naive. Maybe I just wasn't, I guess, educated enough on the whole adoption process and what that all entailed. But it didn't really seem to bother me. In fact, I remember as a teenager, I always referred to my birth mother as a cunt or a bitch. How can you give birth to somebody and then just kick them to the curb? Just to give them up like that. What kind of garbage does that? But again, I just didn't understand. I think I resorted to anger as the first feeling, and I just went with it. I didn't really question things after that, and I just kind of went through and lived my life after that. But growing up, I always had questions. I always thought, why do I look so much different than everyone else? Didn't have the same interests as everyone else. Um, the masking thing, I think, yeah. And Nigel, you mentioned it was kind of me versus the world kind of scenario. That was very much me. And some days I feel that way, even now. But as a kid, I felt it was me against the world, or me versus the world. Um, my entire childhood, early adulthood, and like I said, even, still sometimes to this day. And some of that, could be the depression and all of that. But, because there's just some days that it takes an act of Congress. I mean, you practically have to put a gun to my head just to get me out of bed. I mean, I kind of lay there thinking, oh God, we're gonna do this again, huh? We're gonna just live life on repeat. Wake up, do the same shit. Wait for that sliver of light to come through and cherish every second of it. Only to have it taken away by that cloud of darkness that seemingly follows me everywhere I go. Um, I might save that for uh, another video as far as the depression goes, but I understand that fully. But I always wondered and questioned why I was so different than everyone else. I didn't really I can't say I really had an identity, and I don't know if that's because of I was adopted. I don't know, if that's because I just didn't understand the process. I feel like I carved my own path. I think some of the stupid things I did was just me trying to find and or establish an identity or create an identity. Just trying to figure out who the hell I am. I guess I always wondered in the back of my mind who and where I came from. And I never had those answers. And it wasn't until the last decade or so that it really started wearing on me more because I was diagnosed with a connectivity or a connective tissue disorder called Marfan's, and I cannot stand that name. I don't know. It just bugs me for some reason. But Marfan syndrome. You know, one of the things that aided in that diagnosis was, I remember, as a kid, I saw lots of psychologists and psychiatrists, and always wanting to put me on medicine for the depression and the ADHD, and this kid's out of control. He's doing stupid shit. He has so much energy and just can't settle down. But every time I would go in to see the doctor, he would always look at my hands. I mean, I'm like, okay, is this guy just a creeper? Why is he looking at my hands? I mean, I just thought that was kind of weird. But that would be explained when I got that diagnosis of having Marfan as a connectivity disorder, connectivity tissue disorder. It affects the heart and things like that. But I kind of got to thinking, what else is in my background, And then all of those feelings that I had kind of internalized and hid for so long kind of started coming to the surface of, I guess kind of like I could even throw in there the genetic memory, things that, you may not necessarily know that happened or occurred, events, thoughts, just different things that would, enter your mindset. Like, where did this come from? Where do these thoughts come from? Where do these ideas come from? Because they don't come from the family I'm with now. They don't come with those that adopted me. So everything just kind of came together. Like, okay, why do I think like this? Where are these things coming from? And I think that's kind of where the genetic memory comes into play. It's in your it's in your DNA. It's in your DNA strands. It's just your chemical makeup, maybe. So I kind of started doing the search. I did a DNA test through Ancestry, and lo and behold, it came back with jack shit. I mean, there was nothing there. I'm like, this is crazy. So am I just like some sort of, spontaneous mutation that just fell from the sky, or just, fell from another planet, or came, from nowhere? I just one day just, snap of the finger and boom, there I was, No idea who I came from, no idea what I came from. So, I did that genetic test and trying to figure that out. And I found on Facebook, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the group. I think it was like Search Angels or something like that. But they were genealogists and geneticists and things like that. And I got in touch with one who offered their service, for free, which is huge. And they did things with DNA. I think they measure it in centimorgans. But they did things with DNA that I mean, I always thought, I should be able to figure that out. I have a background in tech, engineer by heart. I learned pretty fast, but the DNA stuff, yeah, just kind of, whoo. I'm like, okay, I'll leave it to somebody a lot more qualified than myself. And, that they came back and said, hey, good news, we found your biological father, who, when they found him, when I found him, he was incarcerated at the time. That's a whole nother long story. He was in prison, and was just released, a couple years ago. I've known him now for about 4 years or so. And I social engineered the children's home, where I came from, essentially. I social engineered them and impersonated someone else. I don't care. I'll put that out there. To get the information to figure out who my birth mother was. And then I was able to confirm that or validate that with the DNA test as well. And, I found her. But I guess what I'm trying to get at, without rambling too much, is when I first met my birth parents, when I first met my birth father, he, I knew right away, obviously, just by looking at him, that that's where I get my height from. His behavior, his mannerisms, just everything about him, without any words even being spoken. I was literally in this old busted ass, Bates looking motel in Florida, you know, waiting for this meetup. I had no idea who the hell this guy was. I was ready for anything really. I'm like, this could be somebody, to come, try to rob me or something. I'm like, whatever happens, happens. I'm ready for it. Let's go. And when I heard that knock at the door and I peeped through the blinds, I'm like, holy shit, I'm related to this guy. I just knew, I opened the door and wow, it's nice to finally see eye to eye with somebody. He's a couple inches shorter than me, but as you get older, things, spinal compression, deteriorating vertebrae and things like that, you shrink a little bit, plus, like, me personally, I have scoliosis, so I swear I should have been 7 foot tall, but anyway, as soon as I opened the door, I just knew. It was unbelievable. We hugged. It was pretty incredible. It was very powerful. But my point is, without any in that moment, in a matter of seconds, without any words being spoken, no words whatsoever, I knew this is where I get this from. This is why, maybe in some aspects I act the way I do. This is maybe where I get, it's almost like conversations that you knew you've never had, but somehow they exist in your mind somewhere, deep dark in your mind. Interests, likes, people, places, things, just it's almost hard to explain or put it into words. But I think, Nigel, with your understanding, on the genetic memory, I think what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it was just a lot of questions answered. It was the same when I first met my birth mother. That was definitely a little bit different of a situation. But yeah, it's like literally if I put them both together, I would say, wow, I didn't just get the best of both worlds. I got the best of all worlds. I got the mental health issues. I got the health issues. Just physical attributes. Just certain things, and I in meeting them again, I go back to before any words were said, and even after some words were exchanged, I think to myself, wow, I had all these questions coming here that I was ready to ask, and half of them were already answered in just a few words. Like, okay, you do that too. You think this way too. You're interested in that too. Like, holy shit, it was just kind of it was unbelievable. But I do believe in genetic memory. I absolutely believe in genetic memory. I believe that there are things that are ingrained into us that even though we can't necessarily decipher what those things are. I think, especially in the case of adoption, I think, at least for me personally, maybe we can only know, when we meet those that are part of us, or when we see them for the first time. Um, Adoption is a very interesting thing to me. I mean, I think it's cool. I certainly support it. And then there's days when there's been many times when I wish, gee, I kind of wish she would have just pulled the trigger and had the abortion, because some days are definitely more difficult than others, but just for a myriad of reasons. So, but yeah, I do believe in genetic memory. It's unbelievable how just in a brief interaction, how many questions can be answered without any words even being spoken. I mean, it's unbelievable. And now that I've had a chance to get to know my birth father more than my birth mother, it's unbelievable. There's just so much to unpack with that. I guess I could say that we're almost like twins. I know that sounds kind of weird because he was the one that planted the seed, but we are absolutely alike in so many different ways. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. I never thought something like that was possible. You know, and I hope that someday or eventually I can meet any potential siblings, because you know he told me that especially with being in bands and playing music and stuff like that, he played a lot of it was rock, southern rock, which is really cool. Still has some of his old equipment, which is neat. But he said he sowed his seed, in many. So, you know, it's possible that I do have some siblings out there that I haven't met yet. Still kind of working on that with the DNA stuff, but I may have to get some assistance again for that. So, but yeah, and as far as the religious side of things and the spiritual side of things, I never really got down with any of that stuff. I find it hard to believe in something that you can't see. You know, it, I know a lot of people say that there's a higher power out there, and maybe there is. Maybe there is a higher power, or some anomaly or phenomenon that we just can't explain. We don't have the answer for. I've never been a religious person. I've never been a spiritual person. I just never got into those things, and I really don't waste my time with it because I'm not concerned with it. I'm not interested in it. And I certainly, don't get me wrong. I'm fine if, if other people are. I'm not trying to take that away from them, and I'm open to listening to others, point of views and things like that on the subject. But it's just not really my thing. But and Nigel, I know you said you were a grave digger for what 20 years. One of the things that, man, I really got to work on summarizing things better. This is already 23 minutes. Holy crap. um, so cemeteries are, I've always been interested. I've always had some strange interests. Like I have an interest in history. I have an interest in kind of, I've always been interested in death, and things like that, and I believe too, like, when you die, where do you go? Well, I mean, other than into the ground, or burnt into ash and stuffed in an urn. I mean, I've had surgery before, so I've been under anesthesia. So I almost kind of think maybe it's similar to that, because obviously I don't remember anything while being under anesthesia. I mean, just it's 3, 2, 1, lights out. Everything's black. So I kind of compare it to that. I guess I think that's it. I don't think that there's anywhere else that that we go. I mean, certainly not physically, but I don't know. But I've always been interested, like in death and things like that. Always curious about it. I actually have some artifacts from like some old abandoned mental hospitals, like the old lunatic asylums or insane asylums. That a lot of them were uh, oh, what's the word for it? Closed down, retired, demolished. Because I've always been interested in stuff like that. Just always curious about it. Um, so yeah, I have some things from a couple of those facilities. Graveyards, cemeteries. I love going to old cemeteries. The new ones, are the more, not so much, but I love going to the old graveyards and old cemeteries and just walking around. To me, that's one of the most relaxing and comforting things you can do. I don't know, it's just peaceful to me. I just walk around. I like to look at the old stones, from like the late 1800s. I think the earliest one I've seen is the late 1700s, like 1798, 1799. I've only seen, I think, one of those, which is pretty incredible. Um, but just to see the design on some of those, the inscriptions and the etching and different things like that. I love going to some of those old, creepy abandoned cemeteries that have just been kind of sitting there for who knows how long. But yeah, I've always enjoyed that as a kid. I always found peace and solace in going to those and just kind of walking around and hanging out. So, but yeah, I do believe in. I got my computer monitor up there for light. I do believe in genetic memory. I really do. And as far as working out, I started working out when I think I first picked up a weight or my first dumbbell when I was probably 10, 11 years old. By the time I was 12, 13, 14, I was, lifting weights, not regularly, just every now and then, sometimes to the point to where I couldn't move for days after. I even started back in the day, early 90s, taking some of the old Weeder supplements. Like Weeder, Joe Weeder Mega Mass 4000, and the amino acid pills that were like the size of frickin' horse pills, and you know creatine, Weeder's creatine, the Muscle Tech, Cell Tech. That was one of the first ones I took. And I remember back then some of that protein just tasting like absolute garbage. It's like, what the hell is this? Like dirt, sand, flour. Just very, ugh. But yeah, I've been working out off and on since I was, I'd say, probably realistically 13, early teenage years, working off and on. And I'm more steady at it now. And it is an outlet for me. It's always been an outlet for me. So it definitely, it's a coping mechanism, but it's an outlet. And like I did in one of my, I just did a quick short while I was working out in the basement. Uh, Working out for me is, the gym or just getting in that zone is also a think tank. Some of the best ideas I've ever had have come to me while working out or while at the gym. When I'm working out, I tune everything else out. Nothing and nobody else exists. It's just me and the gym, me and the weights, me and the equipment. I put earbuds in, and I get tunnel vision. And you could come up and talk to me, and might think I'm an asshole because I'm not responding. But it's not that. It's just I'm just in such, a hyper focus, and I have tunnel vision. And my mind is just on a lot of different things. I'm trying to sort stuff out in my head. So. That's why, I think it was it Chris Jones with Physiques of Greatness back in the day? He used to say, "No roids, just rage." That I've done some pretty insane things, some pretty intense things in the gym when I've been pretty pissed off that I probably wouldn't have been able to do under normal circumstances otherwise. So, but anyway, guys, it's almost at 30 minutes here. Like I said, I'll work on trying to maybe get to the point a little bit faster going forward. But I like Nigel said, I would really appreciate seeing more videos being made. Let's start a little community. Let's build something here. Let's kind of respond to each other. Let's talk. Let's chat. Who are you? Where are you from? What are your interests? What motivates you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? I'm interested. I want to keep the conversation going. So please, uh, anybody that sees this, make a video. Um, just something, anything, and let's let's build this community and keep the ball rolling. So, all right, guys, I'll be back soon.